The Islanders' long and disappointing season has ended. We've got to look at the season finale against Tampa Bay, really a microcosm of the real season that was. Plus, we start to look ahead to the offseason and what an interesting and important offseason it'll be for this Islanders team. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast. So glad you could join us today, and thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. If you've got something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe something you'd like us to talk about on the show, feel free to send us an email. The email address, as always, lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. And of course, you could follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles. You could follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and notes and everything concerning your New York Islanders during this offseason, from free agency to the draft, trade rumors, and contract negotiations. Whatever's happening during the offseason, you'll hear it here on Locked On Islanders. So, this difficult season for the New York Islanders came to a close Friday at the UBS Arena. And, this game, this season finale against the Tampa Bay Lightning, really was sort of the Islanders' season in microcosm. It began with a lot of hope and optimism, and the Islanders led just 32 seconds into the game, had a 3-1 lead. After two periods, after the Pajot goal early on, Kiefer Bellows scored. Josh Bailey scored on the power play. And you thought, okay, 20 minutes left. The Islanders are going to end the season on a high note. Well, it didn't exactly work out that way. They end up giving up 5 goals in the third period to a hungry Tampa Bay Lightning team, and they end up falling by a score of 6-4. The only highlight really of the third period was what may be the very last goal in the career of Zdeno Chara. But overall, a disappointing performance by the Islanders, and one of those situations where it was defensive breakdowns, again, that ended up costing the Islanders this game. And the goals that they gave up, most of them were from very close to the net, some defensive breakdowns, just the hunger, the desire, the ability to win those 50-50 puck battles, to pick up your man coming back. You know what it is? In a nutshell, the lack of attention to detail, especially on defense, ended up really hurting this Islanders team, and they end up on the losing end of the game. And you look at the final standings, the Islanders 37, 35, and 10. That's good for 84 points. 16 points out of a playoff spot, or 8 games back. You go back to the 0-8-3 stretch that was caused partially by the long road trip to start the season, mostly by the fact that they were playing without 7, 8, 9 players in several games because of COVID. And you just have a situation where instead of going 0-8-3, if the Islanders would have gone, 7-3-1, during that stretch, or even if they were 500 during that stretch, let's say 6-5, that would have put them within a couple of points of that last playoff spot. And a healthy, ready to go Islanders team probably does a little better than 6-5 in that situation. So overall, just a loss that doesn't sit well with Islanders fans. Yeah, there were some highlights. I mentioned the Zdeno Chara goal, and we'll talk a little bit more about Big Z in a few minutes. Having Kiefer Bellows score was definitely big. You wanted the power play to get a goal. They did that. But overall, giving up the hat trick to Steven Stamkos, can't say Ilya Sorokin was horrible, but I can't say he was great in that third period. Overall, just the kind of game like the season where you could say, okay, there were some good moments, there were some good things, but the disappointment and the bad taste that it leaves in your mouth when you look back at it sort of overtakes whatever positivity you had. Now, Ross Johnston, Sebastian Aho, they were the scratches. So Robin Salo was back out there on the ice for the Islanders to close out the season, and I'm sure he'll be back at Bridgeport to play the playoffs there for the Bridgeport Islanders, which start tomorrow or now today. Salo only played 12 minutes and 18 seconds in this game. Noah Dobson had another assist, but again, a -2. Josh Bailey had a goal, but he was a -3. Just, for every good thing that this team seemingly got to do in this game, the bad just sort of overtook it. And that was, like I said, this season in microcosm. So it's over. The Islanders had a very difficult end to the season. Really a lot of work. I mean, you look back at the end of the season and you just sort of say to yourself, wow, they closed out with a lot of games and not a lot of time. And clearly that was costly to the Islanders down the stretch. You saw them just look like a tired team late in the season, and no question about it. So 37, 35 and 10, 84 points, 2 games over NHL 500, 5th place in the Metropolitan Division, but 16 points behind the Capitals for that final wild card spot in the East. A season that will forever be looked at as a disappointment. But where do the Islanders go from here? We're going to start to discuss that on the show in the coming weeks and months. So we've got early rumors, things about Semyon Varlamov, Mathew Barzal to talk about. We'll talk about Big Z and his possible retirement. We've got our Islanders birthday of the day. All that and more still to come on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, once again, thanks for making Locked On Islanders your first listen. Now for your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts take you right through the playoffs. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Let's turn to the rumor mill because, that's always a thing And here are the rumors going on. 2 Islanders with futures up in the air. Both of them have a year left on their respective contracts, but their future with the Islanders sort of a little bit of a question. Mathew Barzal asked before leaving, cleaning out his locker room and heading out for the offseason, about his future with the organization. And here's what Barzy had to say. This is home. This is where I want to be, where I want to win. I love my life here, the city, the fans. Our new rink is amazing. Love wearing blue and orange. Would love to sign long-term here. And he mentioned that he thinks it's great when a player spends their entire career with one organization. Now, would the Islanders love to sign Mathew Barzal to a long-term extension? He has 1 year left on the 3-year bridge deal that he signed a couple of years ago. Yeah, I think the Islanders would love to. Barzy is coming off a bit of a disappointing season, as are many, many Islanders players. So the question now becomes, could you get him now for a little bit less money than you might have been able to do last offseason? And certainly I think more, it'll cost you less to sign Mathew Barzal now than it would if he goes out and has a very strong season next year. Barzy sounds willing. And to me, if I'm Lou Lamoriello and I want to maximize this team's future, and if I think Mathew Barzal is one of the pieces we're building around, and I think the Islanders do feel that way, then the time to sign Barzy to an extension is this offseason, when he's coming off a disappointing 59-point in 73-game campaign, and he was a minus 15, which, by the way, was the worst plus-minus for the Islanders all season. So, to me, you strike while the iron is hot. He's in a good place mentally. He wants to stay with this team. Maybe it's time for Lou Lamoriello to think about signing him now. Meanwhile, Semyon Varlamov basically telling Kevin Kurz of The Athletic that he was relieved that he wasn't traded from the Islanders at the trade deadline. I remember we mentioned on the show, Lou Lamoriello had said that he spoke to some of those veterans on either expiring contracts or who were the subject of trade rumors, actually asked them if they wanted to be traded or if they wanted to stay. And Varley, who has a partial no-move clause, 16 teams that Varlamov has said he will not be traded to, that only leaves 15 other teams that he could be traded to. He said he wants to return again next season. Now, again, would it make sense for the Islanders to try to trade Varlamov, who is older, who has a year left on his contract? We know Ilya Sorokin is capable of being the starter. We know that Sorokin is in a position where, he could play 55, 60 games if need be, and you bring in a less expensive backup to play 25, 30. The question is, will Lou Lamoriello do that? He could probably save $2-3 million, bring in a less expensive backup. If Jakub Skarek is ready, and they feel he's ready, although I think he's still probably another year away, you could easily save $3-4 million against the cap by trading Varlamov and use that savings to bring in the puck-moving defenseman and or goal scorer that this team really needs. And look, let's face it, no matter how you slice it, puck-moving defenseman and goal scorer in reverse order, goal scorer first, puck-moving defenseman second. But those are two of the most expensive commodities in the NHL, other than maybe the third most expensive is your star goaltender. But right now, to free up $3-4 million in cap space by trading Varlamov, either to bring in one of those pieces or to be able to get the money to sign one of those pieces, I think it would make a heck of a lot of sense. And, we'll see whether that's something that Lou Lamoriello is willing to do this offseason. I know Lamoriello doesn't want to leave the Islanders shorthanded at the goaltending position, but sometimes you got to take a little bit of a chance and say, hey, if Sorokin gets hurt, we may be in trouble, but if he stays healthy, we'll have a great goaltender and the ability to do other things to make ourselves a better hockey team. So we'll see what happens. As for Zdeno Chara, this may have been the final game of his career. 1,680 regular season NHL games. He was serenaded as he headed off the ice. The fans, even the opposition was sort of, paying its respects to Big Z. A bona fide Hall of Famer as soon as he's eligible. No question about that. And if this is the last game of his career, and it very well could be, here's a guy who is 45 years old. His career came full circle. Started with the Islanders back in 1997-98. Played 4 seasons for the Isles, then went on to Ottawa. Boston was sort of the place he'll be remembered for. He was the captain there. They won a Stanley Cup with him as their leader. And then the late stints in Washington and back to Long Island to finish it out. 209 career goals, including the last goal in the last minute of what may be his final game. 680 points and 2,085 penalty minutes, including 85 this year. Averaged 18 minutes, 44 seconds a game with the Islanders this year. Really carried himself with class. Did a good job of mentoring Noah Dobson, which I think is something that really was a big contribution to the Islanders this year that isn't going to show up directly, on the back of Zdeno Chara's hockey card or look like, okay, you look it up and then, okay, yeah, that's what Zdeno Chara did, for the Islanders. But at the same time, you really have to appreciate that Zdeno Chara did that and really helped the Islanders out by mentoring Noah Dobson and Robin Salo and, Sebastian Aho and all of these young players because, he not just showed them things, and you saw so many times on the bench, Zdeno Chara talking to Noah Dobson, pointing things out to him, encouraging him. But it also, he leads by example. And that there's something to be said for that. How do you handle yourself away from the rink? What do you do when you're on the bench? How do you study film of games? How do you prepare mentally and physically for a game? All of these things, seeing what a Hall of Famer who had the ability to play until he was 45 was able to accomplish, that is a big deal for a player like Noah Dobson and like Robin Salo to learn from, and I think that's very, very important. When we come back, we have our Islanders birthday of the day, some final thoughts as we wrap up the regular season, and a lot more. More to come on this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Summer is coming, and with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations. Just throw them in your bags and your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you're fueled for your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both, and it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. All Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built Bar, you could eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. Have you tried the Puffs yet? We're going crazy for the Puffs. They come in crazy flavors like banana cream pie and even churro. Who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? And they have only 140 calories. Sign me up right now. Most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but pack 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Time now for our Islanders' birthday of the day. And today is the 43rd birthday for former Islanders winger Jason Chara. Chara, a native of Edmonton, was drafted by his hometown team, the Oilers, in the 5th round back in 1997. Made his NHL debut in 2000-2001, playing one game for the Oilers, then went on to the Blue Jackets and Capitals before joining the Islanders for 2 years, 2016-17, and most of the 2017-18 season was a trade deadline acquisition that year by the Anaheim Ducks. We look at one of Chimera's better games with the Islanders, December 27th, 2017, at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. The Buffalo Sabres coming to town. Buffalo with Robin Lehner in goal and Yaroslav Halak, the netminder for the New York Islanders. After a scoreless period number 1, it was the Islanders getting on the board first. Our Islanders' birthday of the day, Jason Chimera, his second from Cal Clutterbuck and Casey Cizikas at 3:41 of the second. Islanders ahead 1-0. Midway through the period, though, Zemgus Girgensons ties it for Buffalo. His third, Jack Eichel and Marco Scandella with the assist. In the third, ex-Islander Kyle Oposo puts Buffalo in the lead. Evander Kane, the only assist in 11:33, but with 1:09 left in regulation, Josh Bailey ties it. John Tavares, the assist on Bailey's 11th at 18:51. We go to overtime, and in the extra session, Mathew Barzal wins it with his 13th. Josh Bailey and John Tavares with the assist. Islanders beat the Sabres by a score of 3-2. Jason Chimera had 1 goal, and it was on his only shot on goal. He played 8 minutes and 55 seconds in what was mostly a checking forward kind of a role. For his NHL career, Chimera played in 1,107 games. He had 186 goals, 22 of them as an Islander, 415 points in 892 penalty minutes, add 12 goals and 29 points in 71 postseason games. None of those were in an Islanders uniform. Jason Chimera, who is 43 today, he is our Islanders' birthday of the day. So the season is over. Hard to believe we started all the way back in October. It's been a wild ride, not always what we expected, but I'll tell you, this offseason is the Islanders at a crossroads. And either this team tweaks and retools and adds an important piece or two and goes back to being a Stanley Cup contender like they were the last 2 years when they went to the conference final, or is this team going to be too old and not have enough goal scoring and not have enough goaltending depth? What is it going to look at? What is it going to look like after the offseason is done? Important draft. No expansion draft this year, so we don't have to worry about losing a player to a new team, but we have got a lot to look at. Will the Islanders be able to get the puck-moving defenseman and the goal scorer or two? Will players like Andy Green and Zdeno Chara be back? We will examine all of these questions. What are the futures of Mathew Barzal's contract situation, Anthony Beauvillier long-term with this team? So many things that we have to think about. We will start in a day or two looking at every player who played for the Islanders this year, reviewing their season, looking ahead to the next season. We will go player by player and discuss what their future with the Islanders may be. We'll have all the latest rumors and everything that's going on this offseason here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. Thanks again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup series, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Islanders podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And, of course, let's go Islanders.